Hello one and all, welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And in this video we will be taking a look at the CV90, also known as in Sweden as the STRF 9040 Charlie, when we're taking a look at the version down in Ukraine. And it has become the best infantry fighting vehicle in service in the entire war down in Ukraine. And it was in 2023 when Sweden provided Ukraine with 50 of these CV90 infantry fighting vehicles, including a couple of recovery vehicle versions. And as you can see, they're covered in Barracuda camouflage. This camouflage reduces the heat signature of each individual vehicle by about 70% and can also hide and reduce radar signatures from these vehicles. So what is the CV90? Well, Sweden started designing the vehicle in the mid-80s after having tested both the German Marder and the American Bradley. And they found those vehicles to be lacking in off-road capability, in armor protection, and primarily in firepower. Sweden wanted a better gun than what was provided. And as you can see on the image here on the right, the 40mm that Sweden uses is substantially larger than the 25mm of the Bradley. So that is why Sweden set out to design the CV90. They wanted a vehicle that would outperform the competition, in other words, in both mobility, in protection, and in firepower. And the CV90 was specifically designed with the 40mm Bofors in mind to be able to engage tanks with flanking shots, to take out tanks in a gunfight out in the woods where distances are 400 meters, 200 meters. So that is the purpose of the CV90, to provide firepower to engage tanks. The other big important criteria was mobility, maneuverability off-road, as in tactical maneuverability in combat. And the requirements were pretty harsh. The Swedish Army wanted full mobility in the far north of Sweden in the Arctic, that in wintertime is, deep snow, and in summertime it's marshes, wetlands, and bogs. And this vehicle needed to be able to maneuver in the far north of Sweden, both in summer and during winter. Vastly different terrain conditions that the CV90 had to face. And here we have a video from the Norwegian trials in the 90s, when Norway were looking to either adopt the Bradley or the CV90. And as we will see, the Bradley fails in the north of Norway, and meanwhile the CV90 will just plow on through like nothing. And so the CV90 is very much specifically designed to wage war in the north of Scandinavia and in the north of the Nordic region, northern Norway, northern Sweden, northern Finland. And no wonder then that Norway and Finland have adopted the CV90 for this very reason. It is a vehicle that can operate without issue in snow, and it is a vehicle that can operate without issue in woods and in marshes and wetlands during the summer. And as you can see here, the CV90 just moves on past where the Bradley got stuck. So this is one of the big advantages of the CV90, its off-road mobility. So the CV90 is a versatile vehicle. It's deadly as hell. It can destroy any target on the battlefield, essentially. If it isn't a tank, it can punch through the front armor of anything it faces. If it faces a tank, it needs to outmaneuver it somewhat and get a flanking shot, but then it can, at a good angle, still have a penetrating hit. It can engage helicopters with ease. It can take down helicopters at a range of 4 kilometers, for instance. And Yeah, it's a versatile vehicle. It can carry 6 to 7 troops. In the Swedish army, it's usually 6 soldiers. And it has been designed to be able to handle up to 30 millimeter autocannons. And depending on the angle, it can also survive RPG hits, which we have seen evidence of. And it has also been struck down in Ukraine by mortars, drones, and what have you. And the crew, the Ukrainian crews, they keep repeating that the vehicle survives all this punishment from RPGs to drones to autocannon fire and even incoming hits from tanks. And that is quite interesting because the Ukrainians have reported on that when they field the CV90 on the battlefield, Russia's response has been to bring in tanks and even T90 tanks, their best tanks, to counter the CV90. We have this one instance when one CV90 pushed out towards the Russians and Russia countered it with 2 T90 battle tanks. So that is how much the Russians fear the CV90. They deployed the best of their equipment to counter it on the field of battle. So who is operating the Stridsfordon 9040, as we call it in Sweden, the CV90? Well, we know that the 14th, 21st, and 93rd Mechanized Brigades are operating the CV90. The 14th have been operating up around Kupiansk. The 21st were outside of Crimea, around the village of Terny, and the 93rd has been deployed, among other things, to Bakhmut and Chasiv Yar, if I'm not entirely mistaken. And of course, most recently, the 21st has been deployed to Kursk and has been taking the lead as the tip of the spear as Ukraine is pushing into Kursk, where we have CV90s pushing into Russian territory, taking the lead in the combat that is ongoing in Kursk. And the vehicle was designed to be aggressive, and Ukraine uses their armored vehicles aggressively in this war. They drive straight up to Russian positions within 50 meters of the enemy, and that is exactly what the CV90 has been designed to do. That was Swedish doctrine throughout the Cold War in the 60s and 70s, and then the CV90 was designed to operate within the parameters of those tactics, driving straight up to the enemy positions, dismounting troops and allowing the troops to storm trenches. And that is what we're seeing here. And it's kind of weird since I myself was trained as a conscript to perform exactly what we're seeing on screen now. Very strange seeing it for real with a CV90 driving up to the trench line, troops dismounting and then getting ready to storm those trenches. And it brings back a lot of memories from my conscription days, let me tell you. But that is exactly what the CV90 was meant to do, designed to do, and we're seeing the Ukrainians using it in its intended role. And it is in this intended role that the CV90 has impressed the Ukrainians to such a high degree. The vehicle survives incoming hits. It protects the crew. It protects the dismounts that it carries in the troop compartment. It can engage anything it comes across. And the gun itself fires 300 rounds per minute, roughly 5 rounds per second. So as you can imagine, if you see a target, an enemy location, you can dish out a lot of punishment at those enemies in very quick, short order. So all in all, this is what has convinced the Ukrainians that this vehicle, the CV90, is the most effective weapon on the battlefield. We've been talking a lot about its reliability, its firepower, its ability to traverse terrain. Let's talk about how well it protects the people inside. And a prime example is actually from one of the first instances we saw the CV90 in action in the war. during the summer of 2023, a CV90 charges across the field, engaging targets downrange in order to hope reaching Russian lines in order to dismount troops. And it will take a hit as it goes across this field, and the assault comes to a halt. And Russia later on actually secures this vehicle and brings it to Moscow quite famously. And this has given us some insight into the capabilities of the CV90 in protecting its crew and the dismounts. And Russia has actually shown us the extent of the damage done to that vehicle. We saw took that hit, the vehicle they captured and brought to Moscow. And as you can see here, you have that vehicle hit multiple times. We can count up to 5 hits, of which 4 are on the turret, and then they show us the interior of this vehicle. They show us the inside, so we can actually gauge the level of damage and destruction done to this vehicle and the crew and dismounts. So it's quite interesting because they show us all over the place inside of this turret. And you have other YouTubers, Russian YouTubers, doing the same. And it's quite interesting. Because if we stop to take a look what they're actually showing us, what the Russians are showing us, we have the targeted CV90 that is now on display in Moscow. Big hit here to the side of the turret, another right here, right next to the gun. This is where they, at Moscow, have put an RPG round to tell us that this is where the RPG round struck the vehicle and destroyed it. As you can see, it took massive damage, but that's just one hit, because you also have a big hit over here, as it appears. And what is the end result of all of this? Well, we can actually look here. This is where that hit happened. The hole next to the gun, it's over here, and then you have, the add-on armor having been removed over here. But what has happened to the actual turret? I mean, the add-on armor has been wiped out, but the actual turret does appear to look very much intact. And right inside here, right here next to the gun, behind all of this destruction here, is this. Does this look damaged or destroyed in any way, shape, or form? No. So Russia has shown us the capability of the CV90's armor and the level of its protection. The amount of firepower aimed at it did not penetrate the armor, because nothing has been destroyed on the inside. The gunner's position is intact, and the Russian YouTubers and everything else clearly shows us that the same is true for the commander's position and also for the troop compartment. So all this punishment aimed at this one vehicle, and nothing penetrated the armor to damage the interior. And this level of protection, this level of mobility, combined with the amount of firepower the CV90 brings, this is what has convinced the Ukrainians that this is the best combat vehicle in the world. And that is also why they want to produce their own, and that is why Ukraine and Sweden has been talking about setting up production in Ukraine to build as many as 1,000 of these CV90 infantry fighting vehicles. And no wonder that they want a vehicle of this caliber when everything in the Russian arsenal behaves like this. But that's not the end of it, because Sweden, Denmark, and the Dutch have promised Ukraine to provide some of the latest CV90 versions available, namely the CV9035NL, which is the Dutch version of the CV90. And they have promised to provide Ukraine with 230 of these vehicles, and deliveries will start during late 2025. And this is a vehicle that is state-of-the-art, designed during the 2000s, put into production quite recently, and it comes with a powerful 35mm chain gun and also has anti-tank guided missiles. And this obviously makes it so that the CV90 family gets a head start on the international market compared to Bradleys and Marders and everything else, because everyone is seeing how the CV90 is outperforming everything on the battlefield. So naturally, the Germans want in on the action, and Rheinmetall has offered Ukraine their infantry fighting vehicle, their latest version, the Lynx, which is on par, most definitely, with the CV90-35. So Germany and Rheinmetall will provide Ukraine with the Lynx infantry fighting vehicle to gain battlefield experience and to be able to show it off to the world that it is indeed a competitor to the CV90-35 and the CV90-40. So all of this has also become a sales pitch, this war. So yes, these companies and these countries are helping Ukraine and providing Ukraine with much needed firepower and armored vehicles, but it also comes down to informing the world that these vehicles are the best vehicles around. So if you can perform well in Ukraine, other countries, other armies will purchase these vehicles, the CV90s, and that is why Germany is now throwing Lynx into the mix here, because they're seeing that they can outperform the Bradley, they can outperform the Marder, they can outperform the BMPs, and it comes down to being a credible contender to the CV90 family. That's it. That's the end of the video. I hope you found it interesting. I hope I'll see you in the next one. And as always, go på marsch, Ukraine, and give them hell.